I'm Sarina Fazan. I'm a journalist, producer, and the host of On the Record. Thank you so much for joining me for this special and historic podcast episode. Today I'm at Red House Streaming Studios for my first ever live streaming podcast. I'm joined by TV investigator Jim Rathmann to my right and legal expert Paul Sisco to my left. We will be discussing trending topics from the recent lockdown in Washington, D.C. to Joe Exotic, and we're ready to go on the record. Let's get started. Guys, I'm so excited, and I can't thank you enough for being here for this historic day for me.
Thanks, Serena. I know we're both excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm admiring Paul's suit game. It's pretty strong today.
So well, you guys look fabulous.
My game too.
Well, we coordinated this. We worked on it last night.
So just to give you guys a taste of where we are, we're at3 Communications in Red House Streaming. We're actually streaming to you live from St. Petersburg, Florida. And it's great. This is historic not only for me, but also for Red House Streaming because it's their first ever live stream from their studios. And what do you guys think with my graphics and everything? Weigh in.
Space age. You know, I think of 8-tracks in the 1980s when I think of this stuff, and this is just next world.
Yeah, this is class act. This is amazing. They've done an amazing job getting this set up. So very excited for you and for them, and this is amazing.
Thank you so much. And once again, what a historic time, right? That for me personally, but also a historic time in our country. Let's start with what we were talking about in the intro about D.C. and the lockdown in D.C. Jim, you were actually in Washington, D.C. when that happened.
I was.
Can you walk us through that and what brought you there?
Yeah, you know, originally we went up there. I'm one of the investigators for Joe Exotic. And so we went up there originally because a lot of his fans were going to be there in regards to a pardon. We had hopes of being able to see a senior advisor. There was some evidence that we wanted to present and things like that. So we went up there. I had a cameraman with me. We were shooting some film for upcoming episodes and so on. But when I got there, it was just strange because I worked in the Secret Service and I worked at the White House and in and out of D.C. for a few years. And this is the first time I've ever been to D.C. and it was completely shut down. I mean, all the restaurants were closed, bars were closed. Obviously, COVID has a lot to do with it, but it was more or less there was wood covering all the windows. Everything was locked up because they were expecting some sort of problems. They were anticipating some sort of issues, and so I wasn't used to that, and I never experienced that in our nation's capital before. It was just very, very weird. On that particular day, which was Wednesday last week, you know, we started doing some filming, doing some interviews in the street and things like that, and you could just sense it in the crowd that just something wasn't right. My own personal experiences, just hearing some people in the crowds talking about, you know, we're going to go to the Capitol, we're going to storm the Capitol, and I'm thinking in my mind, that's a terrible idea. Why would you ever want to do that? But unfortunately, that's what was being said amongst the crowd. I think anytime you observe people putting on body armor and helmets and you have gas masks, I mean, I literally observed at least a dozen people with gas masks. They were communicating on radios. It's just, you know, it's not going to end well. And so those are the things that I observed, and it was just a very unfortunate situation for our country. I think that's unfortunately going to be a black eye forever.
We have a lot of questions pertaining to that and you being there, but you know, Jim just mentioned something, Paul, when he said things were boarded up. We didn't anticipate, right, the protest, or did we? Did you think do you think there was a sense there's something may have happened, maybe coming?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, whenever Jim tells me why he's in a certain place, I have a theory that he's actually CIA. He's deep undercover. So this Joe Exotic excuse is interesting, but I'm not sure I buy it fully. But no, it's really, Serena, to your question, I think there's a lot of math involved. I mean, you know, you have a large crowd, and in any crowd, any group of people, you know, you're going to have fringe element that are wearing the foil hats and maybe the buffalo horns, as we saw in this, and you're going to hear outrageous comments from time to time from people. I think what we probably need to avoid, if we can, is to extrapolate that sort of very de minimis number of people to the entire crowd. You know, it's there's going to be some bad actors in every crowd, and I have heard about the boarding up and so on when people go to D.C. because it's usually such a bustling city, and it's, you know, it's the heart of the American society really when you go up there with all our memorials and such. I've been hearing for months that it hasn't looked right. So. But also, I've learned to trust instincts of people like, you know, the Rathmanns of the world that were in Secret Service capacities and that kind of thing, because that's what they're trained to do.
Right.
So, if he was feeling it, I think there was good reason to believe something might happen.
You know, over my time in the Secret Service, I worked tons of events. I worked the 2012 presidential inauguration with President Obama. I've been on their campaign tours. I've done Republican national conventions, Democratic national conventions. I have done so many events, but this is the first time before the event even happened that I knew something just wasn't right. And of all the events I've ever worked, and believe me, there's protests at everything. There's always some sort of small pocket somewhere, but this was different.
So Jim, if I can, it appears to me that one of the primary problems was they looked like they didn't anticipate it. I mean, were they understaffed from a law enforcement standpoint, or what was the primary mistake, do you think?
I think the Secret Service did a great job around the White House grounds, keeping all that protected. They always do an outstanding job, and granted, I might be a little bit biased towards them, but they did a tremendous job. The Metro PD there did a wonderful job of blocking off areas as well. You had National Guard in certain areas. So the security around the White House and everything was there. The issue is that at the Capitol, there wasn't enough security for a siege of people. Protests are one thing. Sieging it and coming over with hundreds of thousands of people, there's really no way to stop that. And so that's where you see the problems. And I've heard people be like, well, they let them in, they picked up the barricade, the bike barricades. Yeah, but what people don't realize is that those bike barricades now become weapons. They become battering rams.
Right, and you
so
saw
you
that in
have
some
to
of the
move them out of the
videos.
way, because you know, take that out of their, you know, don't let that become an issue. Pull that away, and I get it, and then protect where you really need to protect. But then you just ran out of people. Nobody expected anyone to actually go into the Capitol. Which just blows my mind, and I don't think that's good no matter what political side of the aisle you're on.
It looked like there were a lot of pro-law enforcement, you know, actual officers that had been around a while. You could see fear in their eyes, and you know, that they're not used to, you know, they're used to being in control of situations. You saw some folks that were really having to ad lib or, you know, open field running in terms of what's the playbook for this.
Right, and there really isn't. You know, the times when I worked in the Secret Service, we dealt with Occupy DC and some of these protests that would take place. It can really go sideways very quickly. And you know, what I think the U.S. Capitol Police and what they did for the minimum amount of people, they did the best they could, and they did a good job. But the most important thing of all, structures can be replaced, but the people that inside that they're protecting were protected. They did their job. They did their job well. I get it, people got into the Capitol. I know they got into some office spaces, but the protectees themselves were protected. And my hat goes off to them. Secret Service was in there, Capitol Police was in there. I'm sure there was some other agencies in there as well, and I think they did the best job they could, and they kept people protected.
So Jim, let Paul and I ask you this, and you can explain to the audience what protocols go into place. So what happens since you were former Secret Service? I mean, you've been in law enforcement. So they get the phone call. Someone clearly calls it in. You know, there's a lockdown.
Right.
So what happens then? What happens? What are the steps that take place?
Well, you know, initially when something like that happens, like the Vice President was there at the Capitol, so the first they're going to do is pull him off of the podium out of his chair, and they have underground bunkers, tunnels, things like that. They're going to go to undisclosed locations and get them protected, get them away from the people, and that's why they're armed. They're armed there to, you know, they get them into the office or into this bunker, so to speak, and they're going to protect it. They're going to fortify it. They're going to reinforce the doors, and they're there to take on any action that comes in. It's unfortunate that you have to actually put that into motion, but when you go through the type of training like the Secret Service specifically, you rehearse for every possible scenario, and you go over it so many times that it becomes muscle memory. So when a situation like this happened, and you know, Vice President Mike Pence was up there talking at the time when this took place, they immediately jumped into action. They pulled him off of the podium chair that he was in, and boom, off they go. It's Vice President, you're listening to us. We have this situation now, and with professionalism, but they're going to do their job, and they did it very well. I would love to be able to speak more, but I know I would be saying things that I shouldn't say to the public, and I don't want to put that out there.
Jim, is there a certain belief that you felt among the crowd? I mean, look, there's been a summer of unrest, going on a year of it.
Right.
Do you think that some of the folks that were involved in breaching the Capitol are saying to themselves, we've watched throughout the summer, including in Seattle, we watched a federal courthouse get breached for 6 weeks in a row at night. Nobody was attacking the crowd at that point. Do you think there's this belief among the sort of fringe criminal crowd that there's impunity, that they can do these things now based on what they've seen for the last year?
Well, I think anytime anyone stores any kind of federal building, some of the protests that we've seen that went on over the last year, I don't think any of that's right. And I think some people should have been criminally charged for it. But in this particular case, you have to know that you're at our nation's capital. You're at the U.S. Capitol. That's no different than storming the White House grounds. You can't do that. And you have to know that doing something like that is going to bring repercussions. If they want to protest and protest around the Capitol and do it peacefully, or however you want to do it, that's fine. But now you're going on to federally protected property. It's marked everywhere. You know that there's people on the inside of that are elected officials that have protection details. You have to know that what you're doing is going to come with consequences. So for those that went in there, they have to know that they were going to get in trouble. You're not just going to get away with that.
Well, I think we're getting to something that we were discussing a little while ago, which is, you have the difference between free speech and conduct,
right.
Prohibited conduct. And sometimes that line is very blurred. You see it is burning a flag conduct or free
right.
speech is, and there is a certain ambiguity that exists as to when that breaks. But also once that line is crossed, it's clearly crossed. I mean, it's crossed when they're breaching the Capitol. It was crossed, frankly, when they're firebombing a federal courthouse also.
Correct. I agree with you 100%. 100%. When you're going onto the Capitol, they're breaching doors, they're breaking windows. They're fortified for a reason.
Right.
There's a reason why they're locked. There's a reason why they're not allowing you in there. There's signs everywhere saying that you're going into, this is federal protected property, nobody come in here. And you're doing it anyway. And it's unfortunate. Somebody lost their life in the process.
Well, and there's sacred memorials to us too. I mean, the United States is a young country, but we have done a job over our existence of memorializing what we stand for in large
right.
part, particularly in the Capitol grounds and so on. It's hallowed in a sense from the American side of things. We make federal courthouses, we make Capitol buildings, profoundly architecturally beautiful because we want people to respect those institutions. And so when we're breaching them and breaking them, and we're on Facebook or whatever holding up a podium,
right.
those folks need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent.
100%.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see it.
I'm heartbroken, though, candidly, when we act on one side as if it's okay over here, but it's not over here.
Right.
I mean, there's criminal conduct that takes place, and I love a free protest. There's nothing that, I'm a First Amendment person if ever there was one. It's my primary issue. And I love seeing people exercise that right. But when that becomes destructive conduct to another person, dangerous to another person, we need to prosecute it. Not
That's
just
when
say,
you're crossing lines.
Yeah.
It's no longer serving its purpose.
Yeah, jail time.
Jim, and you mentioned something too when you were talking about the vice president, and it became focus to get him out of there and bring him into an underground bunker. For all those people that do watch shows, 24 personally being my absolute favorite with Jack Bauer on a lighter note, and how, but all those criminal shows, that does exist.
It does exist.
So there are bunkers, there are places that we may not know about
right.
that they take.
There's a lot of things that we don't know that they put into security measures. But I will tell you that the men and women in the Secret Service and the U.S. Capitol, our State Department, there's a lot of agencies that we have that are true professionals in what they do. They train for these scenarios. It's just unfortunate that they had to actually put one of those into action because there was a legitimate threat going on at that time. I heard word that there were people walking around the Capitol talking about hanging. Vice President Pence. So
Gosh.
when you're hearing things like that, that's a big, big threat. And then the Secret Service is always going to be on top of that. But what happened at our U.S. Capitol is just something that I hope to never, ever see or hear of happening again. It's a real unfortunate situation for our country.
Oh,
Well,
go
I was
ahead,
gonna
Paul.
say,
Go
one
ahead.
of the things I've seen over time, I do criminal defense work, as you know, for a large part, and you'll get a call occasionally from a client who you may know from a prior incident, and they're being investigated by the feds because they've said something online now, or they've said something to a neighbor, or they've said something outrageous. And you know, it doesn't take long, 24 hours before there's an FBI agent or a customs agent sitting in their room. I don't see that happening to the extent that it used to. At least I'm seeing folks, you know, that have some celebrity status where I'm thinking to myself, you know, if there was a deterrent there, or there was a threat at least, that you can't make threats against some of these folks as to their physical well-being or their families or so on, that people would tend to abide by that a little closer if there was an occasional deterrent. I mean, am I wrong? Am I seeing less of that?
No, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that you're seeing less of it. I think they've gotten good at figuring out which threats are actually credible and which one is just somebody, you know, just saying words, right? And so it's being able to dissect that correctly, and then acting on those that are credible threats. And they've gotten really good at that. It's become like kind of like a science. But you have to follow up on every one of those threats. Look at when we had with the mass shooters that we've had in the movie theaters or at the schools. Somebody knew that something was going to happen and they didn't speak up. Nowadays, you have a lot of people speaking up more to what they're hearing and what they know. But like I said, you have to make sure it's a credible threat before you go knocking on somebody's door to find out what they're doing or what they're up to, or if you're coming with search warrants or arrest warrants. You really want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row and that this truly is a credible threat.
Well, expanding on the topic with what happened in D.C., we want you to know, the audience, that we're not making this a political podcast at all. I know a lot of criticism that we've heard is that anchors showing, you know, their political favorites. So we are not going to do that, but let's just talk about what happened and the timing. Paul, I want you to weigh in on this. The timing of this lockdown and this unrest with Joe Biden, you know, so close to the day that he'll take over the White House. Just talk about the timing of it and explain this to us a little bit.
Kind of a loaded question.
Yes, I know.
Paul, I want you to comment on the entire political landscape, but don't make it political.
I know. I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw it out there. It's fair for me to throw it out there, right?
No, it's very fair. Listen.
Because we want you guys to know that, you know.
And this is what I appreciate, too. So we're in a new sort of forum. You know, we have the opportunity in this great studio here, and we have 3 people that are talking about the issues of the day, and there's no rules other than we respect each other, right? But that's the essence of the First Amendment. That's what I love. I don't, you know, it's impossible to not show. You can't be neutral. You can't be, you know, Switzerland and not have a word or two that has a certain connotation to it. But the reality is, people are more animated and they are more into politics than they have been in my lifetime. And I think it's exceeded probably where folks have been politically over the last 100 years. I think that the math, once again, is such that 75 million people may have voted one way and 75 another, which is, first of all, that's an awful lot of combined votes. 150 million votes in a country of 320 million, if in fact that's the case. That's substantial, and that shows an involvement that's incredible. Tensions are high. People have been locked up for the better part of a year also. So it's not like we've been training for triathlons and so on. I mean, these people are sitting there watching their television, they're watching podcasts, maybe like ours, and they're saying, boy, I'm getting a little riled up, you know? People are concerned. I really do believe, Jim, Sarina, that 99% of the American public are folks that have opinions about certain political items. They want to take care of their families. They're not for a second going to be the person with the foil hat or the buffalo fur that we saw that's running with a flagpole and going to, you know, skewer a window on the Capitol. We have to I believe, embrace where we came from, which is our First Amendment. The essence is our right to assemble, to speech, and to the press. And if you're on this side or this side, it doesn't matter. You listen to that person, you try to convince them of their arguments. We're getting away from that. There's no right in this country, and it's key. You have no right to not be offended. You know, the Texas versus Johnson Supreme Court flag burning case, you know, it was a 5-4 decision. They said, look, as much as I hate to see a flag burn, as reprehensible as that is to me personally, I love the fact you can live in a country that has the right to express dissatisfaction with the government. It says far more to say, I live in a country that allows you to say that. So why do we want to take that away from each other? I mean,
it's the conduct, as you keep on saying. It's one thing to express it, but then it's another thing if you're breaking the law.
Yeah, and if a few knuckleheads want to engage in this kind of violent activity, it shouldn't stop the 99% of us, wherever you fall in the political spectrum, from being able to express your views.
So, Paul, before we start getting into, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
No,
Jim?
I agree with what Paul is saying. I mean, people need to be able to get along even though you have difference of opinion. Like, that's okay. We're allowed to have a difference of opinion and be able to talk about it. I talked on the way over here this morning with a friend of mine, and we have difference of opinions on a lot of topics, but I still love him to death. So it doesn't make a difference. It's okay. We're allowed to have difference of opinion. We can still get along.
We should just all love each other, right? So before we get into what brought Jim, I'm going to want to talk about Joe Exotic and why you were, I know we mentioned it already, but really get into why you were there. Paul, can you explain to those who may not understand, or just put it into words that we can all understand about this impeachment process right now? You know, again, history making. We're live streaming our podcast for the first time. Red House Streaming is live streaming our podcast for the first time. We're living in a historic time, and now we have a president for the first time that has been impeached twice.
Yeah, the term impeachment is always a little bit misleading, right? Because the reality is what being impeached basically means is they've decided to bring charges against you, okay? You're not officially impeached or convicted until there's a 2/3 vote out of the Senate. So, you know, you need the votes, or you need to carry the Senate. The parties that brought the impeachment know they can't carry the Senate right now in that vote. At least not prior to the inauguration of new folks into the Senate. So there is a little political grandstanding taking place on both sides. There's a good percentage of the American public who might otherwise support the party that's doing the impeaching, that is disgusted with the fact that with a week to go until the term ends, we're doing this. I find it difficult to believe, regardless of what party you might affiliate yourselves with, or an independent as I am, that can be looked at as a good faith effort. You know, their job is not to brand a person for history with the fact they were charged twice. He's been charged twice. There's been no conviction. They don't anticipate a conviction this time. It's akin to a grand jury. You know, I could candidly get a grand jury together if I was a prosecutor and decide I'm going to indict Rathmann and Fazan for a conspiracy to broadcast a political action show. You know, it's not hard. Convictions are the difference.
And what about the timing? What about the timing, though? And does that explain the timing to us and what could happen? Just because we're so close to the inauguration of Joe Biden.
Yeah, I find it incendiary on both sides. I mean, why are we doing this? I mean, we're at a point where, you know, there was a time when president or the folks in power might come together and say, look, for the better good of the country, I don't agree with what's happening right now, but we need to cool it down a little bit right now. Let's listen to each other. This isn't the time for battles to take place. We're a country of words and decisions. We're not a country of attacking people physically. Let's tone the rhetoric down. And that's for both sides, candidly, and for all of us as Americans. But let's listen to the toned down rhetoric of the other side. They have a right to say it. They have a right to impeach you if you're going to be impeached. But guess what? The other side has a right to say, get that out of here. There's nothing to it.
Absolutely. So
Good points.
I want to go back, very good points. Thank you, Paul. I want to go back to what brought Jim to Washington, D.C. in the first place. And just to give you guys a little taste of what's happening too. So Jim and I met for the first time because we worked on Joe Exotic, Tiger's Lies, and Cover Up. He's the TV commentator. I've been a local anchor in the Tampa-St. Pete Bay Area market for 18 years, 23 years all together in my career. Respected Paul Sisco for years as a very prominent attorney in this area, always leaned to him for legal advice. So I introduced these two guys. They both weighed in on it. Well, you really are the star of the show. Isn't he the star of the show?
I was not the star of the show.
No, I wasn't either. No. So anyway, that's how the three of us met.
I'm in the international edition. I was cut out of some of the local.
You went global.
Yeah,
global.
I'm more of a global So
So Jim, talk to us about Joe Exotic and this presidential pardon, and then Paul, you weigh in. Could a presidential pardon even happen with this timing, with the new president, swearing in on the 20th?
Well, a pardon is very difficult to get to begin with, so you really have to have new evidence and new ways to present it, whether it's to a senior White House official or get it to the President of the United States. Pardons are extremely difficult, but a lot of time has been spent on this, 257 pages in order for the presidential pardon. So, putting all this together, finding new evidence, finding the mishaps within his trial, and then trying to present that so somebody could hear it, hopefully get it to the President of the United States and get him a pardon. That's kind of been a play for Team Tiger, which is Joe's two attorneys and also his investigator that he has out there in Texas. But aside from that, you still have to work on the appeals process. You still have to work on getting him a new trial or getting his convictions thrown out altogether. So all that is going on at the same time, but a lot has been focused on the pardon. Will he get it? I think everyone's hopeful for it. Will it exactly happen? I'm not sure. Not sure what's going to happen with the new administration and where they stand on it. I don't think that's known by anybody right now, and where presidential-elect Joe Biden, where he's going to stand with it.
Okay, Paul, talk to us about presidential pardons and what's the likelihood of this, and could it even potentially happen at this point?
I hate to tell Jim this, but I don't think Joe's getting a pardon right now. I mean, it's possible. Pardons are long shots. They're sort of the Hail Mary throw at the end of a football game.
Correct.
You can get a state pardon. The governor can pardon you for state convictions. I think I was telling Jim before the show a little bit about this. When the focus is on a pardon, it does a disservice in some ways to the client, because the public then thinks, oh my gosh, there was nothing wrong with the trial. But the appellate process must be failing. They're not looking at post-conviction issues. Did he have competent counsel and such? Was there prosecutorial misconduct? When you're talking about the pardon, all they want to report on is the current president going to show some favoritism to this person? It gets used more than people think, though, with that being said. I mean, Obama used it substantially, as did Trump. I suspect on the way out the door, as is often the case, there's going to be a list of people you're going to hear about and that did get pardons. I don't know if Joe's at the top of that list, and not based on the substance of it, Jim, but based on the fact that there's other folks maybe that got ahead of him priority-wise, maybe even in time.
Right.
And you said Team Tiger was hopeful, though, that this is going to happen.
They're hopeful, and they're putting all that forward. I actually presented some new information to them recently that made its way up to the White House in hopes of this pardon being able to happen. But it's a long shot, and we'll just have to see if he's fortunate enough to get it. I have spent a lot of time recently going on YouTube, onto Joe Exotic TV, and breaking down the trial and the trial transcripts. Ever since this docuseries came out almost a year ago, nobody's really known what the issues were within his trial. And so we've been breaking that down, because there are a lot of issues within the trial. There are a lot of things that don't make a whole lot of sense.
I agree with Jim.
And picking that apart.
He's been showing me some of the information that happened. And when we depend, this is another problem, when we depend on the little bits of information we get, even on Tiger King, a longer documentary and so on, we don't get the full story. You know, Jim's actually looking at trial transcripts. He's in the weeds, and that's where the gold is.
Right.
In my opinion.
And you're trying to find, that the issue, where is this wrong, and pointing that out, letting the public know, but getting that information out there. But also that works for the appeal as well. You're building a case. You're finding new evidence. You're trying to find reasons to give Joe a chance outside of prison. But you have to find it. You have to get into the weeds. You have to dig for this, and then when you find it, you've got to expose it.
How is Joe doing? I know you cannot talk to him, right? But you guys are communicating
No,
via email?
we communicate all the time now. It's been very difficult for him. He's in the prison. He's very depressed over that. COVID's running wild, not only in the country, but it's running wild in the prison systems as well. So if Joe were to get sick, he has some health-related issues as well. So he can be really susceptible to this COVID. And we don't want that to happen for him either. So for him, he wants to get out. He's tired of being behind walls. He screams it every single day that he did nothing wrong. He helps an awful lot with providing information whenever we have questions about things. He's always there to answer that for his own defense. And for him, he just wants a fair shot for the truth to be heard so he can get out and go back to his life, and reconnect with his family.
Do you believe him? Are we allowed to ask you that?
From what I hear from him and what I'm able to verify that he
and
says.
yes, you are allowed to ask him that under our First Amendment.
Yes.
Now, whether Jim wants to answer it and can, it might be different. but-
Great comeback. Great comeback. You're right. I am allowed to ask you that. So do you
Yes,
believe him?
I do, and that's because the information that I've been able to see, that I've been able to research, and that I've been able to verify is adding up. And so I do believe what he is telling me. And I just think it's only a matter of time before he gets his chance in front of the courts to get his conviction overturned.
Wow. You heard it
I
right
believe
here
that.
on the record. So last question, unless you guys have something more to add. Will Paul and I see more episodes? Will Paul make another international version?
Well, for our audience, a ruse was played on me where I was brought in for the day and I was the legal expert. I didn't make the cut for the national edition, but I understand I am in the international version, and so there's some folks in Belgium and so on that are really interested in what I do.
He makes me laugh.
Did you hear from Sven yet?
I had Sven from Yugoslavia actually,
Nice.
and he
love
had a skiing accident. I'm gonna work with.
We're laughing because we do want you to know when a show is taped or they bring in all these cameras, they spend hours and hours and hours even to get 30 seconds of time. So Paul was there all day, and then he finds out he's not in the U.S. version of the show.
Maybe I have a face for radio.
No. They executive producers in L.A. actually gave you even a larger role.
Well, you went global.
You went
All right,
global.
you were like,
Here.
I'll just go international. No big deal.
ZZ Top used to say nationwide. I'm international right now.
So are we going to see more episodes, do you think?
I believe there's going to be some more coming here in the future, and hopefully we can get Paul onto
On
the
the
national
national
one as
version.
well.
guys
And
give me some
hopefully you'll be a
tips
part
on
of
what
it
I
as
need
well.
Well, a personal thanks to, on this podcast, to Jessica Everlith, who gave me my first ever shot at being a producer on
she's
a
great.
national show. She really is great.
Very nice woman.
She's great.
It's been such a good experience, doing that show and being able to meet you. And then obviously Jessica and I are now friends, along with Teresa and Rebecca, and there's a whole bunch. And
Conveyor
it's
Media.
really Conveyor Media, and it's really been a great experience. Investigation Discovery did such a good job with this show, and just everybody involved, that even behind the scenes, your editors, your producers, just all the people involved. It's really just been a tremendous experience. I can't wait to do more in the future and get this guy over here
I appreciate it.
recognized nationally here.
And look, we're all friends now. Isn't
We
that
are.
great for this very historic moment?
We
for
are.
On the Record,
That's right.
streaming live for the first time.
And congratulations
Thank
to
you.
you in this beautiful
Yes.
studio we have here.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank
Well
you.
earned.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will wrap up this episode of On the Record with Sarina Fazan. Once again, a huge thanks to the whole community out there, as well as CP Communications and Red House Streaming for giving us this unbelievable opportunity. Thank you so much to Jim
pleasure.
Rathmann and Paul Sisco for being here for me on this milestone moment. You can, of course, follow me on all of my social media platforms. We certainly hope you do. Please follow these two as well. You need to get a Facebook and Instagram, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Have a safe day, everyone, and thank you so much again for watching and your support.